Today we'll delve into the case of a 17-year-old girl who stepped out of the cafe where she worked weekends and vanished without a trace. Police began finding one disturbing clue after another, suggesting something truly awful had happened to this girl. From the beginning, this case became Sweden's top news story, drawing in over 1,000 people for the largest search operation in the country's history. In the end, they managed to uncover the grim truth, leaving everyone stunned at how such a tragedy could have happened. Lisa Holm was born on February 7, 1998, in the small Swedish town of Jo. It was a quiet and peaceful place where she lived with her parents and older sister. Lisa was a kind, positive, and determined person. Even before finishing school, she decided she wanted to go to Australia and study architecture. Lisa also traveled a lot with her parents, seeing many other countries. She was quite independent and, since her teenage years, had been working at various part-time jobs to earn money on her own. Before the summer of 2015, when Lisa was 17, she finally got her first serious job at a cafe about a 40-minute drive from her home. For the first few weeks, her parents drove her there, but soon her father decided to buy her a scooter. Lisa had a license for this type of transport, while she could only get a car license after turning 18. She was happy with this gift because she wanted to commute to work on her own. But for the first few weeks, her father accompanied her in his car since Lisa had almost no experience driving on the roads. She only worked weekends, and her father accompanied her every morning and evening. This went on until June 7th, when he finally let her drive to the cafe alone. Somewhere around lunchtime, her parents decided to visit her at work and have lunch together. That day, the cafe was pretty crowded, so Lisa was really busy with work. She took a short break for lunch, had a snack with her parents, and then they went back home. At 6:23, Lisa texted her father that she was leaving work, but 3 minutes later, he received a call from her. He picked up, but no one answered. He heard some voices in the background and thought Lisa had dialed his number accidentally. The father thought she was talking to her colleagues and also heard the sound of a car door slamming shut. He called Lisa's name several times with no answer, then ended the call and began waiting for her to get home. But she didn't show up. An hour passed, and Lisa's parents started to worry. She should have arrived by now, so her father immediately thought something might have happened to her on the way. It was her first time riding alone on the scooter, and he was deeply concerned about her safety. He tried calling her several times, but Lisa's phone was off. After waiting a few more minutes, her father decided to hit the road, hoping to meet her along the way since Lisa should have taken the shortest route. The father feared Lisa might have had an accident, so he drove at a slow pace, scanning the road, but Lisa was nowhere to be found. The man eventually reached the cafe without finding his daughter. Upon arriving at her workplace, he noticed Lisa's scooter parked in front of the building. By that moment, the man was already in a state of panic, having been unable to find his daughter throughout the entire way. Seeing her scooter, he immediately calmed down, thinking that for some reason she was delayed at work. However, there was no one in the cafe, and the man noticed something else. Lisa's scooter keys were left in the ignition with a helmet hanging from its handle. All of this led him to believe that something bad had happened to his daughter. She would have never left the keys in the scooter, abandoning it in the parking lot unattended. Meanwhile, Lisa's mother called the cafe owner in hopes of shedding light on her daughter's whereabouts, but the woman claimed to have no idea where she could have gone. She had called her employees around 6 p.m., and they said they were closing the cafe. After the call from Lisa's mother, the cafe owner immediately got into her car and headed there on the way. She called 4 of her friends who lived nearby and asked them to help with the search. When the cafe owner arrived at the scene, they, along with Lisa's father, began searching both the establishment itself and the surrounding area. Their last hope was that Lisa, for some reason, might have decided to take a bus instead of the scooter. They checked the schedule, and her mother, along with Lisa's older sister, drove to the bus stop in their town. Unfortunately, this theory was not confirmed. Lisa was not on the bus. So her relatives immediately contacted the police. By that time, it was almost 1 p.m., and it had already gotten dark outside. The police immediately launched extensive searches. The fact that Lisa's scooter was left in the parking lot with the keys led them to consider the possibility of abduction. Cases like this are quite rare in Sweden, especially in the remote provincial area where Lisa's town was located. Therefore, police immediately dispatched several groups with search dogs, while other officers began knocking on every house located near the cafe. When Lisa's classmates and her friends learned about her disappearance, they began spreading information about it on social media, hoping to attract more attention and possibly find some witnesses. The search continued all night, but yielded no results. On Monday morning, the police department announced Lisa's disappearance to the public, urging anyone who had useful information to come forward. Around the same time, a man who came to work at a barn right across from the cafe discovered a motorcycle glove on the floor and reported it to the police. Detectives had already inspected this barn on the evening of Lisa's disappearance but hadn't noticed the glove there. They showed it to Lisa's parents, who confirmed that the glove indeed belonged to their daughter. This further supported the abduction theory, and the police deployed additional resources for the search. By that time, news of Lisa's disappearance had spread throughout the country, and hundreds of volunteers joined the search. On Tuesday, police received several more alarming clues. Volunteers searched the area along the dirt road located a few hundred yards from the cafe. There, they found a phone case, a receipt, a ticket, and a broken smartphone screen. Investigators immediately determined that all these items belonged to Lisa and focused the search in that area. Soon, they found other parts of the broken smartphone, Lisa's ID, and several more receipts. All these items were scattered along the same dirt road. After the discovery of those pieces of evidence, the police became almost certain that Lisa had become a victim of abduction. They threw all available resources into the search, and with each passing day, more and more people joined in. This case became the main news topic in Sweden, and hundreds of volunteers flocked from all over the country to participate in the search. A local volunteer organization specializing in finding missing people also joined the effort. All of this made Lisa's search operation the largest in the country's modern history, with over 1,000 people participating in total. The police also received numerous calls with tips. One woman recounted that she went for a jog the day before Lisa's disappearance. At some point, a man who stood next to his car stopped her in the middle of the road. He spoke to her in English and asked for directions to a city she had never heard of. She tried to show him the way on Google Maps, but the man asked her to get into his car and show the route on his navigator. Naturally, the woman found this request quite suspicious, so she refused and continued running. She also shared one interesting detail with the police. The woman believed she had already seen this man among the workers who were repairing the same barn located across the road from the cafe. Lisa's colleagues also shared one observation. On the day of her disappearance, one of the witnesses noticed two men standing across the road from the cafe, looking toward the establishment. She didn't think much of it at the time, but after Lisa's disappearance, she decided to share this fact with the police. The next morning, on Wednesday, Lisa's father, along with some friends, went to search the dirt road where her belongings were found. Walking a bit further, he made several more alarming discoveries. He found Lisa's driver's license and her house keys. It all seemed as if Lisa was being taken along this road away from the cafe, while the abductor was throwing her belongings out of their car or other vehicle they used to kidnap her. The police and volunteers concentrated all their efforts on this area, but no other items were found. That same evening, a friend of Lisa's father was returning home from the search. Passing by the cafe, he noticed that the police tape had been removed from the barn where Lisa's glove was found. The man decided to go inside and look for any other clues once more. He grabbed a flashlight from his car, as it was already getting dark outside, and walked around the premises for several minutes until something shiny on the floor caught his attention. When he looked closer, he saw a woman's earring, and another one just like it nearby. The man reported this to the police, who showed the earrings to Lisa's parents. They confirmed that these pieces of jewelry belonged to their daughter. The police once again sealed off the barn and searched it more thoroughly. The lead detective later explained that on the first day of Lisa's search, their main focus was on finding the girl herself. So the barn was inspected, not so thoroughly. They might have missed such small items as earrings. But now they brought in numerous forensic experts along with search dogs. This time they noticed a rather unusual piece of evidence behind one of the walls. The police found human feces. At first glance, it may seem unrelated to the case, but the forensic experts put forward a quite interesting theory. They explained that when criminals commit serious and horrible crimes, their body produces an extreme amount of adrenaline, which sometimes leads to the uncontrollable need to relieve themselves. For example, it's common for killers to wet themselves before or during the murder. Considering that Lisa's glove and earrings were found in the barn, the police theorized that if she was indeed abducted, the perpetrator might have dragged her into this building. Therefore, detectives didn't rule out the possibility that this person, under the influence of adrenaline, couldn't hold it and relieved themselves. So, these feces were sent for DNA analysis. On Friday, the search area was expanded, and volunteers reached a farm located about 2 miles from the café. It was a complex of several large buildings where many people worked, and the search team decided to inspect them all. However, shortly after they arrived, 2 men came to the farm. They didn't speak Swedish and communicated only in English. One of them said that the police had already been at this farm, but the search team leader didn't rush to believe it. He thought that he would have known about it if that were the case, so he decided to continue the search. The 2 men walked around the farm for a while, watching the volunteers, and eventually drove away. About an hour later, members of the search team found a pile of branches behind the cowshed. Under it, they found a motorcycle helmet, jacket, and headphones. The police immediately arrived at the scene and confirmed that all these items belonged to Lisa. They sent forensic experts to the farm for a more thorough search. Detectives also heard the story about the 2 strange men who tried to dissuade the volunteers from inspecting the farm. The police also recalled the story of a woman who encountered a suspicious man speaking English while jogging. In fact, they already had an idea of who it might be from the first days of the search. They had visited all the houses near the café, and in one of them lived 2 brothers from Lithuania along with the wife of one of them. All 3 didn't speak Swedish and communicated in English. They were the only people within several miles who didn't speak the local language. The police also had other indirect reasons to suspect them. The brothers worked in the barn across the road from the café and at the farm where Lisa's helmet was found. They were familiar with these locations, and the dirt road where Lisa's belongings were found led to their house. Considering that there were no other suspects, the police decided to question all 3 of them. Meanwhile, forensic experts arrived at the farm together with the volunteers. They continued to inspect this area, and soon their attention was drawn to an old trailer. It was surrounded by tall grass and looked as if it hadn't been used in many years. But next to its door, the grass was flattened, as if something had been lying there recently. Some of the grass was also trapped under the door, indicating that it had been recently opened. As soon as the forensic experts opened the door, they were immediately met with a strong smell of decay. Inside the trailer, there were many lockers for clothing. Apparently, it was once used as a changing room for workers. All the lockers except one were locked, leading the experts to suspect that Lisa's body might be in one of them. They began opening each locker and eventually saw that Lisa's body was actually in one that was left open, hidden behind a pile of old clothes and rags. Despite the small size of the locker, the perpetrator managed to fit their victim inside. Lisa had a rope around her neck and a large amount of tape over her head. Her pants were pulled down, and her shirt was pulled up. Medical experts determined that Lisa died from strangulation. However, they found no signs of sexual assault. All of her clothing was handed over to the lab, while news of the discovery of her body rapidly spread throughout the country. All this time, the news of Lisa's abduction dominated headlines in Sweden. When her body was found and the public learned of Lisa's brutal murder, the case shook the entire country. Such crimes were extremely rare in Sweden, and people were shocked that someone could commit such a heinous act. On the same day that her body was discovered, something unusual and rather eerie occurred. YouTube users stumbled upon a video posted 13 days before the murder. The video was titled 13, and it featured a countdown timer. What was most unsettling was the name of the channel that uploaded the video. It was called Lisa. News of this video quickly spread throughout the media, leaving many people stunned by the series of coincidences. Some people began to speculate that someone had predicted the murder, but in reality, it turned out to be much simpler. It appeared that someone had just changed the channel name and video title after Lisa's body was found. Either this person wanted to spark another conspiracy theory or was just playing a cruel prank. Meanwhile, the police were doing everything in their power to find the killer as quickly as possible. At the time of Lisa's discovery, investigators had already brought in 2 brothers and a woman, and they all denied any involvement in the murder. They claimed that at the time of the abduction, they were at home providing alibis for each other. According to their accounts, the older brother, Naris, was asleep in his room while his wife was preparing dinner, and the younger brother was on the computer. Naris also added that around 8 p.m., he woke up and went to the gas station, where he bought pizza and cigarettes. The police were pretty skeptical of their alibis, as all 3 could have simply been covering for each other. They collected their DNA samples, but investigators still found no evidence directly linking any of them to the murder. However, this didn't last long. Forensic experts were working in the barn and on the farm, utilizing all available resources and manpower, and soon their efforts paid off. In the barn, there was a small office-like room that had a large window overlooking the café. Upon examining this room, experts discovered 15 different traces of male semen on the walls and floor near this window. It appeared as if someone had stood there watching the café employees, including Lisa, and satisfying themselves. These semen samples were immediately sent to the laboratory, and experts quickly extracted DNA profiles from them. All 15 semen traces matched the DNA of the older brother, 35-year-old Neris. The same applied to the feces found in the barn. They also belonged to him. In the next room, which had previously been used for storing cow's milk, forensic experts noticed a pipe about 2 feet above the floor covered in a thick layer of dust, except for a small strip. The size of this strip perfectly matched the rope used to strangle Lisa. Traces of blood were also found on this pipe, and the DNA analysis confirmed it belonged to Neris, on the floor beneath the pipe. They discovered a piece of the same rope. Experts examined it and identified 2 DNA profiles, Lisa's and Neris's. This was a significant breakthrough for the police. It finally linked the man to the rope used to kill the victim. Furthermore, a hair belonging to Lisa was found on the floor of this room. Another crucial piece of evidence came from her jacket. DNA traces belonging to Neris were also found on it. Based on this evidence, the police believed that she was killed right there. They pieced together an approximate sequence of events. Neris had been observing the café for some time, and when Lisa was alone in the parking lot, he approached her. Based on the jogger's account, he could have asked Lisa for directions to a certain city or used some other tactics. Then Neris might have asked her to get into his car to enter the route into the GPS system. Considering Lisa was kind-hearted and always tried to help others, she might have agreed. Once she was in the car, the perpetrator taped her mouth shut and drove her to the barn. There, he wrapped the rope around her neck and hung her from the pipe. According to the medical experts, this sight likely excited him so much that he defecated on the floor due to an adrenaline rush. When she died, he placed Lisa's body in the car and drove to the farm, tossing her belongings out the window along the way. There, he hid the body in the trailer locker, covering it with old clothes scattered around. All of this, from the moment of the abduction, took the perpetrator less than an hour. Despite all the evidence, Neris continued to insist on his innocence. His wife and younger brother had to be released because there was nothing against them. Once free, they almost immediately left Sweden and returned to their homeland, Lithuania. The preparation for the trial was intense. Neris claimed he had worked in that barn for a long time, suggesting his DNA could have been present there due to his job. Additionally, he had an alibi provided by his wife and brother, although there were serious doubts about the credibility of both sources in court. This could have definitely worked in his favor. On the other hand, the presence of Neris's DNA on the victim's clothing could only be explained by direct contact with her on the day of the murder. The police also found a witness who saw his car near the café shortly before and after Lisa's abduction. According to them, the car passed along the road between the café and the farm several times at the same time when Neris was supposed to be sleeping at home, according to his brother and wife. For several months after the discovery of her body, experts continued to examine all the available evidence using the most advanced equipment. Eventually, they uncovered traces of Neris's DNA on almost all of Lisa's clothing, including the inside of her underwear. Considering that the whole country was still following the case, investigators continued to search for any other useful clues that could impact the legal process and further prove Neris's involvement. They even went to Lithuania to speak with his wife and brother once again. The woman continued to insist that he did not leave the house between 6 o'clock and 8 p.m. But when it was the younger brother's turn, detectives suddenly got what they wanted. After telling him about all the evidence against his brother and detailing what he did with the 17-year-old girl, the man decided to tell them everything. He claimed that Neris actually was not at home that evening and only returned around 7:30 p.m. He was covered in dirt and immediately threw all his clothes into the washing machine. When the police started to question all the residents and reached their house, Neris whispered to his brother, "Tell them I was home at that time." Later, Neris explained that he was afraid he would be framed for a crime he didn't commit because he was an immigrant and had no alibi for the time of the abduction. The younger brother truly believed that his relative had nothing to do with it, but after hearing about all the evidence, he realized it wasn't the case. Lisa's funeral took place only a month after her murder. The church where it was held could only accommodate 130 people, but there were many more who came to say goodbye to her. Organizers even decided to set up benches and large screens outside so that everyone could watch the ceremony. The trial began 4 months after the murder. This case once again captured the attention of the entire country, so everyone involved in the process was under tremendous pressure. None of them had the right to make a mistake. Neris's lawyer insisted that his client's DNA could have ended up on the victim's clothing because he had worked in the barn. The prosecution, however, pointed out that this version made no sense, especially in the case of Lisa's underwear. The only way the suspect's DNA could have ended up there was if he touched the victim's underwear. The lawyer couldn't provide any other solid facts pointing to his client's innocence. At one point, he tried to push the version that the real murderer was Neris's younger brother. According to this theory, the brother somehow took multiple samples of Neris's DNA and placed them on the victim's body as well as at the crime scene. However, the lawyer failed to explain the possibility of such manipulations with the DNA. The trial lasted for a month, and Neris was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment in a high-security prison. Given that this is Sweden we're talking about, the facility resembled more of a decent 3-star hotel. His lawyer attempted to appeal the verdict, but the appeal was rejected. In early 2017, Neris himself applied for deportation and was transferred to a prison in his homeland. The reasons for this decision were unknown. Lithuanian prisons are significantly worse than Swedish ones, yet the court decided to approve his request after all. Providing comfortable conditions of detention costs Swedish taxpayers several hundred per day for each individual inmate. Later that same year, his motives became clear. He appealed to the Lithuanian court, and his sentence was reduced from life to 15 years. However, the joy was short-lived for the murderer. A few weeks later, the court overturned his decision, and Neris was once again destined to spend his entire life in prison. Only now he had no chance of returning to the comfortable Swedish cell. 5 years later, in August 2022, Neris faced yet another downside of being transferred to a Lithuanian prison. While inmates were being moved to another block, one of them attacked Neris with a shank. He suffered serious injuries and died on the way to the hospital. As for his wife, the question of her involvement is still not entirely ruled out. Police noted that there is practically no chance of her direct involvement in the abduction or murder. In that case, experts would have found her DNA on Lisa's clothing or belongings. However, it cannot be ruled out that she knew of her husband's crime and helped him evade justice by providing a false alibi. Neris's younger brother also raises questions. Café employees reported seeing 2 men standing near the barn and watching them. Considering that one of them was likely Neris himself, the second should have been his brother. However, the man's DNA was not found either in the barn itself or on Lisa's clothing, making his involvement in the murder unlikely. Perhaps they were indeed observing the young employees with the older brother and even discussing inappropriate things, but only Neris decided to commit such a heinous crime. Alright, guys, share your thoughts on this story in the comments section, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you for watching.